Hello everyone. Today I'd like to talk about some of the things that have been taking place over the last 24 hours. And in particular, I want to ask the question of what exactly defines a state. As you may know, Malaysian flight MH17 was probably shot down over the state of Ukraine. Also, we had the land invasion, the Israel forces invading Gaza. Today, I am joined by Nick, aka Pie Rebel. And I'm also joined by Jamie Nelson.
Good morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world.
So some of you may know this is not an exclusively a Bitcoin or cryptocurrency show. I like to kind of steer it by what really inspires me to think. I'm a curious, open-ended thinker, and over the last sort of 6 months or so, people have been following me on Twitter who are like-minded individuals. And I think we've got some of those people here with us today. So guys, let's get your reactions to what happened in Ukraine about 24 hours ago. What do you guys make of it?
Jamie doesn't mind, I'll go first. I think it's probably just a very tragic mistake. You know, it's a very heated region going on right now. You have a lot of people pointing guns at each other. You have a lot of, guys on edge waiting for just anything to kick off. A lot of, if you do this, I'm going to do that. And I think it's somebody just got caught in the middle, and it's a tragedy that I don't think is going to be investigated to be more than that.
I mean, I just really find it quite difficult to comprehend who has the right to draw a line in a bit of dirt and then claim that, I've got power over anything and anyone who, occupies this space. I really struggle with it. I don't get it. And also, how high up do you have to be? So if I've got a bit of dirt here, and let's say I'm a sovereign, and I say, right, I've got some guns and power and influence and stuff, so whatever you do in here, well, you will have to go through me. And I'm at state, the word state just means memory. Physicists use it all the time to just mean a memory, right? So I've got a record of all the laws, and I've got a ledger that keeps account of who owes who what, and who's got, which money belongs to who. And you don't have to remember it. You can outsource that. And if you get into any disagreements, don't worry, as the state, I'll kind of lay on like a legal system. It won't stop time or anything. You'll have to come to the court and get in line, but we'll try to come up with, some justice for you. But how high up do these states go? So let's say someone flies like outside of Earth's orbit, and technically they are like within my state, but just really high up. And I've got a missile that is capable of reaching that aircraft. Am I allowed to just shoot that out of the sky? Is that how it works?
I think, when you look at the Earth from outer space, you don't see these borders on the actual Earth. They're imaginary lines that are made only on maps and in people's minds. Traditionally, states and things were made by geographical things like rivers, and things made borders. And then they just got to be arbitrary lines that people set up, and they made fences and things like that. So, I think individuals should be able to own property and a piece of land that they can maintain. But the idea of the country or state or village or anything having control over the people's land that the individual owns is just a very nefarious idea to me.
Well, this is what Ukraine looked like last night after what had happened, about sort of 14 hours afterwards. So this was like a plot of all the air traffic, and as you can see, the vast majority of airlines are routing around the state of Ukraine, not just Donetsk in the east, which is where MH17 crashed, around here where my cursor is. But I did actually notice that Air Malta was still flying, and they actually responded to my tweets. I said, who wants to be on an Air Malta flight over Ukraine right now? And to their credit, they did kind of respond, and they did say that they would now be routing, here they are, we would now be routing all flights to Moscow around the Ukrainian kind of airspace. I mean, so one of the tweeters did actually comment that in theory this would be the safest place to fly right now, because nobody's going to want to shoot down anything over Ukraine at the moment. I thought it was interesting the way the Western media responded. I was watching Russia Today last night, and they were kind of getting a bit upset with the Western media, kind of claiming that the audience was basically given a choice. It was either the Russians or the Russian separatists, right? That were in Donetsk. That it was no way could this be Ukraine. And given the fact that when something like this happens, everybody is searching for the truth. Everyone's hungry for information. All of the distance between each other now just vanishes, and all I want is the truth, or at least some kind of narrative. And the dominant narrative to come out of the Western media was it was either the Russians or the Russian separatists. Did any of you guys pick up on that?
Yeah, I've only heard that it was possibly Ukrainians from, non-Western sources. So that's something I'm keeping an eye on, and Putin is claiming that he's going to work with the Malaysian president in investigating this, and so we'll see what comes out of that. But like I said, I think it's just going to be somebody who got caught in the middle, and neither side wants to claim any sort of responsibility, which is a fucked up thing to do when you're shooting missiles at people. You should already have claimed responsibility before you pull the fucking trigger.
Right.
Or gave a warning, we're pissed, and if you fly into our area, we're going to shoot you down. To just start arbitrarily shooting shit out of the air.
But how does it work with air traffic? Because what if someone doesn't understand that local language? I mean, does everyone in air traffic control speak English or something? I mean, Esperanto, or is there some kind of like universal airspace language?
I bet there is. I bet there's a code or something they use.
It's English. My brother-in-law is an air traffic controller in just north of Los Angeles, and I also have my stepbrother's an air traffic controller. And yeah, the international language for air traffic control is English, albeit foreign speakers have a hard time with it, but they have their lingo too for certain things.
I just looked that up. It does seem to be English. Wow, that's interesting. Kind of makes sense, though. You figure this is where flight originated in the United States with English speakers, so
yeah,
that makes sense.
That is right. I was actually really quite inspired by the way Reddit responded. I'm spending more and more time now on Reddit, and within minutes of it happening, you had posters that were posting up the deleted tweets that the Donetsk Republic Twitter account allegedly took down. This shows a book, which is the anti-missile defense military hardware that could have been used allegedly to shoot down a plane at 30,000 feet. And
didn't somebody claim that they didn't have those? Somebody from their group?
Right. Well, everyone is. I mean, I've heard every stakeholder in this claim that they didn't have the capability. But it's not just the hardware. You also need the expertise. I mean, it's not as simple as just pressing a button and aiming at the sky. I understand there's quite a lot of complex maths involved. There's quite a lot of complex machinery. It's hard to really understand how someone could just do this accidentally. Right. So what's interesting is this kind of citizen journalism that we're seeing. That within sort of minutes, we have people posting, and look at this guy. He's got 1,700 points on Twitter, so he's been upvoted a lot of time. Rebels started deleting their posts that they have the book system. One does not simply delete stuff from the internet. I love this comment. And it just kind of the Google Web Cache link has it up there. It's right there. Everyone can see it, but if you try going to that tweet now, it no longer exists. In fact, that link, that link doesn't even work. So what I was interested in is, as I was watching Russia Today and BBC News, I kept kind of flicking between the different channels. What I noticed was that I was hearing one story on mainstream media, and I was hearing something, and I was reading something completely different on social media. Like even on I'll tell you the other qualitative difference about social media. People were posting up pictures of their friends who were getting on that flight. That really got me. I mean, that was like heart-wrenching. Someone had a friend on Instagram who took a picture of his flight tickets as he was about to get on, and the guy screen grabbed it on his iPhone and posted it up on Twitter. And that was just like, oh boy, that really hurts.
I
Because
think
you're building a connection, you know.
I think now is in the last year or so, we're really seeing how much propaganda the mainstream news really is, because we have all this social media and people that are actually there where we're seeing this, where it's real people that are involved with the situation on the ground, and they're not just spouting the bullshit that the state wants the people to hear. They're telling it like it really is.
Yeah, but how much do you think governments get involved in social media? I mean, do you think it's possible? Because there
A
was
lot.
a video was released by the Ukrainian authorities that allegedly portrayed a Russian military officer giving instructions to shoot down an aircraft that they believed was a Ukrainian aircraft, pro-government aircraft, and that was used as evidence. That was then taken down, and then a lot of people were using that as evidence that, well, that then it must have been the Russians. They clearly shot down a plane that they thought was a Ukrainian plane, but was in fact, and in fact apparently it has the same colors and things like that. And I wonder whether a lot of these, because all of these comments are, for the most part on Reddit, most Redditors are anonymous, and there is even like a Reddit etiquette. Was it Rediquette? Is that what they called it? And you're not allowed to dox someone. There's all these kind of rules. So I wonder how many government, how much time and resources government spends on social media.
They spend a lot. That was one of the things that came out in the Snowden leaks, wasn't it? That they're quite intent on manipulating forums for various different topics, and Reddit is a rather easy place to, like you said, be anonymous. It's not as easy as to be anonymous, and quite as powerful as, let's say, 4chan, as with their community. Those guys, when those guys get motivated, they can pull things off, but it's a different type of environment. I think it'd be pretty easy for COINTELPRO to exist on Reddit.
Well, Facebook too, we've seen the things where they were manipulating the advertising to, try and manipulate the moods of people, and they do the same with the little news stories that pop up in the side. That right there just kind of hits your subconscious, and if you keep seeing day after day or minute after minute this propaganda in the side of your screen,
yeah,
that's gonna affect you.
Especially for people, I know a lot of people just live their lives in an absolute daydream. They're just on autopilot the whole time. They go, they do their job, they get up, they go to their job, they get home, they have a drink. They've got like a routine, and they become very, very predictable. Even the people that I know that are playing the game in the finance sector in banking, whenever I talk to them, they sort of tell me, look, Chris, I'm just here to make money and then I'm going to retire, right? Like, I'm just going to make so much money that I never have to work again. And this is their strategy for life. You've got a section of the population that I think is just playing for a draw. They're not playing to win. They've already resigned themselves. They've looked at the rules and the state of play, and that is going.
But a draw is a win, right? Like, the game's rigged against you, so if you break even, you're coming out ahead.
Yeah, but I'd be with Albert Camus and also Michel Foucault said that something very similar. They had a very similar quote. They said, when the whole system is against you, turn your whole life into a work of art, right? That your whole embodiment and everything you do is a resistance to the status quo. And I'd also, let's mix in a bit of Aristotle as well. So Aristotle had this idea of the phronimos. The phronimos was someone who responded to the unique situation in the unique way, rather than responding to every unique situation in a generic way, which is the same way that the law does things, right? That I've got a set of rules, I remember what those rules are because I've got it all documented and written down, and when this happens, here's how I'm supposed to respond. But the fact is that the nature of reality is changing. Let me take the border analogy that I used earlier a little bit further. Let's say that foreign object, that enemy object, is flying above your state, so you've got your borders here, and there is an enemy flying, let's say, a light year away. And let's say you've got the capacity to observe these objects at that kind of distance, and you've even got the military might to be able to reach them with a missile. Now, Einsteinian special relativity comes into play, because of course you've got your reference frame, but this is so far away that the photons are actually taking time to reach you. So now it's not a simple case of waiting for it to cross over your border. It's now a case of anticipating when it will and shooting the missile in anticipation of it getting there, right? So is this whole statehood just not a complete illusion of space and time? Are we not completely deluding ourselves? Maybe the nature of reality is changing, that now we've got this thing called the internet. We don't need to outsource our memory to a government anymore. We outsource our memory to the internet. I mean, I know I do. I keep a lot of my knowledge on Google and in my Evernote, where I store all my notes and all my clippings from all the articles.
On this topic, we should hop over into the fact that, did you guys see Storage has launched their crowdfunding
No,
today or last couple days? I plan on actually. I'm going to probably put 0.1 Bitcoin in just to help with get it started. It looks pretty neat. Decentralized cloud storage is definitely the future, and you're talking about offloading the state to somebody else. It's better to do it as a trust mitigated system than one that can you can find the actual centralized nodes.
Do you guys ever think about? And I want to come back to this idea, but do you guys ever think about what lies behind the apparent uncertainty of our world is an entity that is able to perceive us, but we aren't able to perceive it other than in the form of entropy? In physics, the physicists call the second law of thermodynamics, they often refer to as the entropic direction, that the level of uncertainty in the universe is always going to increase. That's one of the most predictable laws of physics that we have, entropy increasing. And I often wonder whether or not the universe is kind of heating up. It's an inflationary universe, apparently. That's what the evidence points to at the moment. And it's not only the universe that's inflating, it's also our world, it's also our currency systems. Everything is just getting bigger and bigger. And the current institutions that we built up over the last few thousand years just aren't fit for purpose anymore. And what I'm saying is the underlying nature of reality is changing. There are people that can see it, and there are people that can't. And then I think there are people that do, that then want to use that knowledge against the people that can't as well. I also think there's an element of the new kind of people, the new sort of hegemony that want to get their feet under the table. But do you think that, like, even our bodies, do you really think that our bodies are evolved from many of the challenges that we're currently facing? Or do you think they're just vestiges, that this is just like this is all like a legacy system? My whole body is a legacy system because it isn't evolved for this hyper-information age.
That's very true. The hands were a tool developed, maybe a couple million years ago to be able to do some things. And eventually we took tools and we built tools on top of tools, and these became a little less, they're more for intricate little work dealing with big machines that handle the things that we used to need 1 million people to do.
Well, have you got a link to that storage thing, by the way, Nick?
Yes, I do actually.
Yeah, Jamie, you say what you were going to say, and Nick, you bring up the link.
Well, one thing to think about too is everything you create, the moment you create it, it starts dying. The moment you're born, you begin to die.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's no system ever that's been infinite.
Well, there kind of is, if it depends on what you want to define as infinite. If you mean as something started from the beginning and gone till now, I would say we have, because it took something to make DNA, and it took the DNA a while to get bigger and become more things. It's just stacking blocks on top of each other, right? You just.
Oh, I certainly agree with you, Jamie. I think a lot of what the problems we're facing at the moment stem from the fact that there are just some people on this planet that just need to die. They've had their day. The king had his day, and he needs to move aside now. I don't mean literally die, but I mean like biologically. I just mean the people in charge now need to be looking for the next group of people that can take over.
And I think the way to do that is through not violence, or not a violent uprising or anything like that. Is, I always think it was the movie 300 or something like that, where there were these old gods that were up in here, and they were worried that the people were going to quit worshiping them, because when the people quit worshiping the gods were going to vanish and not be a real thing anymore. And I think states and governments and these imaginary entities that are formed by these people getting together and assuming control over regions of land and people will be dissolved by if people just quit acknowledging their authority. Because if you just say, you know, if somebody comes up to you on the street and says, hey, those guys over there told me I have the authority to frisk you, you'd say, screw you, you don't have that authority. But another guy comes up to you and says, I'm going to have to frisk you because that, and he's wearing a shiny badge, you'll let him. If people start saying, I don't see that as having an authority because you have a shiny badge, but why doesn't that guy have the authority?
Yeah, I agree. In sociology, there's a phenomenon known as the bystander non-intervention effect. And I've witnessed this as a cyclist in London. I wear high visibility clothing. And if there is an accident, everyone looks at you wearing the high vis, even though I'm not a police officer and I'm just a regular guy. And because I wear high vis, I was witness to an accident once. A lady got hit by a car. She wasn't too badly hurt, but bad enough that, you know, she had to go to hospital and stuff. And everyone looked at me to call the police. And I'm just standing there going, oh, you know, there's so much responsibility right now. And I think there are two ways that as an individual you can respond to one of those situations. You either just pick the situation up and you show absolute equanimity, like you just know what to do. And I've seen people do this. I've even seen people that are usually quite, you know, anxiety disordered and, you know, usually quite a nervous individual actually respond to a situation like that with utmost, you know, courage, and just they know what to do, straight into action. But often it's kind of like, you just gave me a whole bunch of power because I was wearing a yellow shirt? Is that really what just happened? Everyone just has this kind of default mode, like even the way we responded to the cathedrals and the churches, where because something's very, very big, well, it must be very, very powerful. And it's almost like we want to outsource our power. But I wonder if we can create, and I wonder if we are trying to create a system now where the right people get to the top, where it isn't just circumstantial or based on like who you knew, or, you know, what you know about who you knew, or, you know, how much money you had and what kind of family. Because as Facebook has been proving, there is also this thing called the interest graft, object-centered sociality. If you want to look it up, there's a sociologist in the 90s, Nor Satina, Chicago University. She wrote a really good paper called Object-Centered Sociality in the Markets. I think that's what it's called. I'll find it and link it below after the show. And it was basically a look at Wall Street and the traders. And she did like a kind of anthropological study where she kind of camped out in this kind of trading center, and she was watching them almost like a zoologist would watch some animals, you know, in the wild. And she was sort of saying like how they kept talking about the market as if the market was God. It was the market with a capital M. And it's like, yeah, the market's going to do this next, and I think the market's going to do that, and then the market, you know, punished me for this kind of thing. And it's almost like quasi-religious. These people aren't really generating anything. They're basically just moving money between groups of people. And the skill is basically to become the middleman. That's where everyone wants to kind of go. But look at how willing those people are to give something else, something that's bigger than them, some kind of authority over them.
Absolutely. You see that, I mean, just the parallels between the church and the state are staggering when you start to look at them. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with people like Larkin Rose or those guys. Larkin Rose wrote a book called The Most Dangerous Superstition, and that talks about a lot about the parallels of the superstition of government and how people basically believe that government is God and granted that authority. And it's just, you know, there's all these rituals that people go through, you know,
Social
with
contract theory is nonsense.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I know Nick, I see him smiling there. He knows what I'm talking about, where, you know, you have these rituals where saluting the flag and Pledge of Allegiance, you got these little kids doing the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag that have no idea what they're saying, but it's this ritualistic thing, like little kids going to church and saying prayers. It's a ritual.
mm-hmm.
And do you have anything to add on that, Nick?
Yeah, it's a bit ridiculous how people have basically succumbed to the godverment. You know, they've basically religion and statism. Let's be honest, the first states were created by religions, right? Like religious orders, They had so that's how they kept their states together, was through like religious might. We all believe this. Our God's gonna punish us if we do that. And you know the kings or emperors or whatever, they were the hand of God on earth, and they made sure that His will was executed. It's really no different. They've only changed it from, you know, this higher being to all of us, society. We all gave this power to this institution with its words on paper that we can look up and see. Look right there. That's what someone wrote a long time ago when they didn't even know about this other shit. This other shit wasn't even on their radar yet, but they sure wrote about something that we're going to use today to decide exactly how we should react.
Well,
That's nonsense.
until we start taking responsibility for ourselves, then I don't think we're going to get over this. I just posted the link to the Norsetina paper in the comments below. I just did a quick Google and found it. And you should read it, because one of the most profitable commodities right now is your personally identifiable information. And this is what makes the price of Facebook stock go up and down. Okay, when the investors of Facebook think that the data inside of that closed siloed database over there is valuable, the price goes up. When they hear rumors that it's dirty data and 30% of the accounts might not even be real, or they might be sock puppets and all this kind of thing, the price goes down. And then Facebook release a press statement saying, oh, we've hired a group of people from the Philippines to now go through all of the accounts and start running algorithms on it to see if they can work out if it's a real person or a duplicated account and all that thing. I can tell you, I have two Facebook accounts, one that I run from a Tor node and one that I run, you know, my official one, and they never found the fake one. I mean, I was able to pretty much like, I don't care if Facebook, if you fucking watch this and you want to kick me off, do what the fuck you want. I don't even fucking go on your site anymore, and I certainly don't go do my web browsing in the same fucking browser that I log in with, because I know you're going to fucking track me everywhere. And I think people need to understand that object-centered sociality isn't just some, you know, interesting academic theory. Facebook call it the interest graph. I think we need to come to terms with something here. There was no real dichotomy between capitalism and communism. In both cases, capital won, right? The objects in our world that make us desire them and make us bring us close to them. I mean, just look at my coffee addiction. This is why we called it Crisp Before Coffee, because I drink far too much coffee. And I don't really have any direct control over that impulse. I mean, I have the regulatory capacity to stem it a little bit and say, okay, 4 cups of coffee today is quite enough. But I don't really control it if I'm deep down honest with myself. And I think what we had to come to terms with communism and capitalism was who got to control that capital and those desires. I think what Facebook have done quite brilliantly, I mean, efficaciously, like they've done it very well technically, is they've identified that before the other market participants, before all the incumbents, the ones that were there before, and they said, you know what? I'm going to build a database. I'm going to build a nice shiny wrapper on the outside. I'm going to use all this emotional manipulation about, like, you know, how your friend, you can see all your friends and keep up to date with them, and you can poke them and like them. And if you try to leave, we're going to blackmail you with, oh, look, you know, these people are going to miss you. Please don't go. And what they do is they then track everything that's interesting about you, and then they start to market stuff at you. And then if the government has a problem with you later, well, don't worry, we've got it all stored here, and we can dig through that if we want to find any kind of dirt. And I think people need to get to realize that no one knows where these desires come from. No one knows what we want, you know, before we do. And trying to run a civilization that basically deletes your time, that really scarce finite commodity that you genuinely don't get back again, is no way to run a civilization. You can't just grab people's attention, have this kind of what Facebook calls sticky content. They actually call it that. It's sticky content. The whole news feed is designed to keep you there. That's why they were one of the first companies to embed videos in the news stream, so you didn't have to leave the site to watch the YouTube videos, because they didn't want traffic going to Google. The reason they bought Instagram is because Facebook didn't like that Twitter had all the bandwidth, and that the people were like clicking on pictures and then going over to Twitter. And in Twitter, you used to be able to see the Instagram picture come up in their stream. And Facebook were like, right, well, we're buying out Instagram. In fact, I was friends with a company in the UK, some of their developers, who had a competitor to Instagram. Even they were acqui-hired, right? So even all of Instagram's competitors were bought out by Facebook. It was a massive land grab, and they weren't allowed to talk about it. I didn't even find out that that was what was happening. We were meeting for drinks, you know, on Friday night at the meetup groups and stuff, and they were just talking to me like they had plans, and I was like going to help them out and stuff. And then one day I just got a tweet saying, look, I'm really sorry, I wasn't able to tell you, but here's the reason why. And it was a link to an article that Facebook had basically paid them off to stop developing their image sharing app, because Facebook decided they wanted it now. And I think if more lay people understood just how cynically these tech entrepreneurs really view them. I mean, here, let's segue into the New York thing, because we've had more developments and it basically ties into what we're talking about. This was the Bitcoin Talk Forum's response to the New York regulations. The sky is falling. I love these trolls, man. I cannot get enough of them. I think they deserve way, way more airtime. But what I'm noticing recently is this troll box called the Bitcoin Talk Forum, which is where Bitcoin originated, where Satoshi Nakamoto originally kind of set this up. What's happening here is you're getting a lot of people talking about, you know, oh, Grandma, here she is. Let's get Grandma up. You know what I'm talking about? Like, in order for the price of BTC to go to the moon, like most people hope it will, it needs to be an ultra-regulated currency so Grandma can use it. When is this ever going to get old? This whole, like, if Granny can't use it, it's not valuable line. Because doesn't Granny just need to fucking wise up? Doesn't Granny just need to learn, like, okay, Granny, you don't have to learn how to program in C++, but please will you get it through your head that it was never a good idea to outsource your wealth to a bunch of third-party people, like people you don't even know and you can't see and can't hold accountable.
They've been stealing from you for years, for generations.
The difference is now we can see it, and now we've given you this powerful tool that basically allows you to hide your wealth. So
I've been saying this, and I think we're the community, and we just need to accept it as a whole, that people will be left behind. It's not like a malicious thing that people are trying to leave others behind. You know, clearly there's reach out to this community that is, you know, the prime community to be left behind in that sort of change like this. But if you can only do so much to educate people. You know, you could sit down, show them, but if they're not willing to go the extra couple steps it takes to do it themselves, they're never going to do it themselves, and that's just something you are going to have to just accept and move on.
So why is it so difficult for someone to get this, you know, culturally, right? So we had a post on Reddit about 17 hours ago, and I think it was basically inspired by onename.io is the originator of this GitHub project, where they basically put the bit license regulations into Markdown format. That's what this readme.md stands for, Markdown. It's similar to HTML, which is markup language. That means you write in regular language, but then every now and again you'll use certain symbols to represent headers and represent body text and paragraphs and so on. It basically it's a meta language that tells the computer what to do with the primary language that the human's going to read. And so they've converted the PDF into a Markdown language and then put it on GitHub, which allows anyone to fork the regulation. This is the more sort of granular liquid democracy that we were talking about yesterday, where someone can basically, rather than saying I either agree or I disagree, you can now say what it is you disagree about. And then there can be some, like, you know, intricate discussions, rather than outsourcing the debate to a bunch of, you know, privileged white guys in a big fancy house that was built by slaves. Yeah, I'm talking about the White House. It was built by slaves, by the way. Rather than like outsourcing it to these government buildings, why don't we all just have this conversation like grown-ups online like this?
Well, why should we even have a set rule for everybody? I mean, there's certain instances,
right?
There's instances that don't apply to everybody. There's there's things that, you know, there's special situations for certain events that happen.
Yeah, this is the problem with law, is it's too generic. It's overreaching, it's expansive, and it just says, and there's too much that is left to the discretion of prosecutors, right? And this is the problem, is that nobody, I don't think anyone really cares about prosecution. I think we mostly care about defense. I think, you know, when someone gets accused of something, what you're really waiting for at that moment in time is, what does that person have to say for themselves? And if they don't give a proper account, like what's happening with Pistorius, I mean, allegedly he killed his girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp. And I think one of the things that happened in that whole kind of media circus was it ended up becoming like a trial by media, where the media were sort of reporting on every little detail. They'd have analysts start, talking heads that would come onto the rolling news, giving all their opinions.
And it's just speculation.
It's a speculation. We don't know. We weren't there. But I think what the general public were hoping for was, I don't know, I want to say like a better performance by him in the stand, where I think a lot of people in the prosecution as well said that he was just playing on emotion, that he was still lying, and that he couldn't come to terms with what he had done. And I think what people were wanting was not so much an admission of guilt or something. They just wanted him to give his side, like a full account of what was going through his mind. And what motivated, even if it was a tragic error of judgment or something like that, I just felt like the way that general public were responding was like, we could forgive you if only you would just be completely transparent with everything that led up to that decision. Maybe it was something that happened to you as you were growing up, or whatever it was deep down back in your history. But we just need to know what it was. Dostoevsky has this idea in Crime and Punishment. He says you get two punishments when you commit a crime. You get the crime, the punishment that society gives you, but then there's the punishment that you yourself give you, that every criminal secretly harbors a desire to be caught. And that actually there were things that you would do as a criminal to aid the capture, because actually you want to get the truth out. Why is it, Adam Smith asked in Wealth of Nations, why is it that my profit, progress, is good, but other people's profit and progress we've got to be skeptical of? Like, if you want to make money, I want to know why.
They're trying to get it from me.
It's fine, you know. But
why? They're trying to get it from me. Are they bluffing? What hand? Are they really showing their hand?
But what is it? Why am I skeptical of other people's profit? Is there something about my profit that makes me question other people's? Am I really just skeptical of my own? And that's what makes me skeptical of other people's? How am I even empathizing at all if I don't have some comprehension of what it must feel like for a defendant on trial, or for any of these laws to apply so broadly over an incredibly diverse, you know, species called the human race?
It always gets me when, you know, it seems like the media a lot reports on these cases where somebody's accused of a crime and then the media prosecutes them. It's no innocent until proven guilty anymore. It's the media assumes you're guilty, brings up all this unrelated evidence and speculation, and I've been accused of crimes that I had no part of. I had somebody make a bomb threat once and use my name to take credit for it, and that scared the living shit out of me. I ended up calling the police department and saying, hey, it wasn't me that made this bomb threat. I don't know who did it, but I want to make you aware it wasn't me that made this threat, because I don't want you coming to my house with the frickin' SWAT team. And I could see how that would have played out on the media. They would have said, oh yeah, Jamie Nelson there made a bomb threat. SWAT team went to his house. We found a bunch of guns and ammo and all this other stuff. And they would have just, you know, crucified me just because of the stuff I had in my house, which everybody here has a bunch of guns and all this other stuff. But the way the media portrays it is just sickening.
Could you imagine if the media got to, or like someone investigated the police after a crime and we went to the police station, we confiscated all these guns, there was so many of these guys in uniform, these gang members just congregated here with tons of firearms, keeping people in cages. It's crazy. They have tons of drugs stacked up in the back that they're stealing from people.
Yep. Yeah, if there was an unbiased report and they reported everything. I mean, I see news reports here. Yeah, police want this guy. He's suspected of being chased. And then
what does that mean? He's suspected of being chased. So he ran from the cops before. So that's the reason the reason they're originally going to get him isn't the reason they want him. It's that he fled from them to begin with. That's why.
There was a story like this a couple weeks ago. Police are on the lookout for this man. He's suspected of being chased. And
Jesus Christ.
And then the next story that came out, with your help, police found this man and shot and killed him in his car. They were suspected of no wrongdoing by police.
But back to this point on the bit licensing thing, I don't understand where the state gets off forcing people to license just to deal with it anyways. Why can't it just be a seal of approval thing? We sign off on these guys. They meet our rigorous standards. They have a government seal of approval. Anybody who doesn't have this, you're risking your own money. Buyer beware kind of warning. Like, why don't?
We've also seen it with the allegations in the UK of the potential government cover-up of the paedophilia that was taking place in the 70s and 80s. I mean, we've already had Jimmy Savile and we've had Rolf Harris, these famous TV presenters that I grew up with. Basically, my childhood has just been decimated recently because all these people that I grew up respecting and admiring and I was watching on TV as a naive kid turned out to be fucking fiddling the kids that they had on their shows and shit. And this was happening right under the noses of the government. It was happening under the noses of the BBC, a national broadcaster here in the UK. And it's like, yeah, so guess what? Every time they use the, what is it, the terraphilia. So terrorism and paedophilia is like, it's one word now. It's just been concatenated into one word. So if you ever come up with like a decentralized solution, right, or if you come up like a BitTorrent or a Napster or a Bitcoin, they always use terraphilia as the reason why you wouldn't want to do it, because they know that most of the sheeple that live their lives on autopilot, the ones on the blue pills, they actually carry around blue pills and they just like chucking them back.
God,
and
that's beautiful.
they willingly live in denial, right? They know that if you use the word terraphilia, then everyone will go, oh yeah, you're right, we can't have this brave new world and this wonderful innovation because of terraphilia. But then it's like the actual authorities are the ones that are fucking doing it. So really what they're saying is, yeah, we want something as powerful as Bitcoin, but only for us. A bit like the Nazi Party. Socialism just for us.
Fascism never went away. They took over, It came everywhere. It just seeped into the background. It is what the world is today. Fascism.
Exactly. Fascism never left. It never left. It just got taken over by a different group of people. Hitler can't have it for himself. We want it instead.
We can't allow these guys who are like racial segregation fascists. We need fascists for different types of things.
Good idea, Mussolini. I really like that idea of yours.
Mussolini defined fascism as the melding of corporations and state, which is exactly what it is now.
Yeah, exactly, with the NSA and all of the story, all of the Facebook data, everything, every single thing that you do online is being stored and is being persisted somewhere else. And people don't understand, like, when you put some data on the internet, imagine getting on a plane with that data, right, and taking it somewhere else. You are actually interacting with another part of the world. You are putting information on a bunch of servers. Do you know the guy working in the data center? Do you know if he take backups or not? You have absolutely no idea, and you just trust it to these people. Don't
they
put
say
anything
they got
online.
5 nines, Chris.
Say again?
They say they have 5 nines. I gotta trust them, right? 5 nines? You got 6 nines, maybe?
You're gonna have to explain that to me.
Oh, it's like uptime, server uptime. We got 5 nines. It's up 99.999%.
Yeah, because that's the only thing we should be worrying about right now.
Right?
Yeah. So someone posted up. Let me get this tweet up yesterday that I felt was quite interesting. It's an old article that he was alluding to, but it was Tel Aviv gave direct access, indirect financial aid to Hamas over a period of years, and it's this old article back from I think 2005. or even 2002, looks like, on informationclearinghouse.info. I don't know exactly how much you can trust this, but this article basically goes into the fact that before Hamas was even formed back in '87, Tel Aviv and people in the Israeli government were funding a lot of the people that then went on to create the Hamas group, and that that Israel basically doesn't know how to handle this situation effectively, and that it's its own worst enemy, basically. And so I don't know why we think that these people are any more, these governments are any more privileged to make the kind of decisions that we're endowing them with any more than anyone else is. And that's why I think that what you're talking about, Nick, with the storage IO and these other decentralized projects, is I've been thinking more and more about how can we inspire people to set up Tor exit nodes, or how can we inspire people to run open source software. Like I spent a lot of time online last night, like with the TV kind of on, and like with the information about MH17 in Gaza, but then I was also on my laptop like downloading applications for how to build boot disks, Linux boot disks with full disk encryption. I was looking in, like, you can actually, there's a Pi wallet that Jeff Garzik set up for Bitcoin that lets you set up your own bootstrap.dat file for the blockchain. So I've got like the latest version of the blockchain. I can run a Python script that will generate a .dat file. It's one file that you put into your Bitcoin folder in the application support folder when you first boot it up, and you don't have to download the whole blockchain. This is called SneakerNet. The SneakerNet is when there's a really famous XKCD article about it. Let me just see if I can pull that right up now. It's very, very funny, and it will tell you all about what the SneakerNet is. And essentially, data can travel, here it is, as if by magic, as if I didn't have that up already. And it's basically the phenomena where, will there be one day where the internet bandwidths will surpass that of FedEx? That once you start getting into multiple gigabytes of data, it's actually just quicker to put it on a disk and ship it by plane or by car to its destination. And one of the biggest threats to Bitcoin is its centralization. That's what we're seeing around all these regulations, around all the hashing power. People want to own this shit, right? They see how powerful it is, and now they want to own it. And what I would like to do is distribute the blockchain so that we don't have this problem. So you download the 24 gigabyte file on your fast speed internet access, and then we start to go to regions of the world that don't have fast internet access, and we give them the 24 gigabytes. Now it only takes them 10 minutes a day to download the latest blocks that changed within the last 24 hours. You've now got a more distributed blockchain. If everyone tries to fork it, at the moment there are 7,000-ish nodes.
It's just about 8,000, just shy of
8,000 nodes, that full nodes. Okay, that means that 8,000 people. There are 8,000 copies, but then you've got to discount blockchain.info, because blockchain.info run a lot of nodes. You've got to discount BitPay, who also run a lot of nodes, and the reason they run nodes is so that they can roughly locate when you join a cryptocurrency network. You have a debug.log file in your application support folder, and that stores your IP address. And obviously you've got to petition the network for the latest block. You've got to ask for, like, broadcast me the changes since I was last online. You record all of that in your debug.log file. Now, if you're blockchain.info or your BitPay, what you're doing is you're setting up lots and lots of Bitcoin nodes with these debug files all over the world. And if you hear of a claim, for the next block near you, you can roughly, because you've got the IP information of where that person is coming from, you can roughly identify who is spent, or where those coins are being spent. So what you do is you just blanket the planet with lots and lots of nodes. And I think one of the dangers is that we end up with a kind of centralization by specialization. And if we don't get on top of this and start educating people and start helping people understand why this is important, that you need a copy of this file, because if someone tries to sabotage this or fork it or take it in a nefarious direction, we've got a copy in, all over China, all over, in places and regions of Africa, even the ones that have poor internet connectivity. Like I say, even with like a 56K modem, a day's worth of blocks would probably take 15 minutes to download. It's not that much.
Yeah, it's important. I don't understand why more people don't run full nodes. I mean, you get to hold the ledger. Isn't that the most important part of this experiment, is how you get to back up the fact you can look up yourself that you have these bitcoins on this address. You know what I mean? You don't have to trust blockchain. You don't have to trust somebody else to keep the ledger for you. You're keeping the ledger.
Yeah, but people don't want to take that responsibility. It's like last night near where I live, someone had dumped a bunch of rubbish in the road, like glass and everything. And I was walking past it, and there were other people around. And I'm like, okay, so who's going to clear this up? So it was me. I had to go back. People were just walking past this thing. Cars were driving up to it. They couldn't pass it. It was obviously just some kids that had dumped some rubbish in the road. And nobody wanted to take responsibility. And so, I mean, my first response, go home, get a knock on the neighbor's door, like get someone to help me. And we cleared it up. It took like 20, 30 minutes, but we did it. And it was just like nobody wants to step in and like go, yeah, I'll own that. I'll do that. Because I believe in the outcome. I believe in the end goal.
If I've been covering the MaidSafe stuff lately, and MaidSafe is addressing a lot of these issues with the distributed networking, and where instead of having the central blockchain where every transaction is held on the blockchain and then everybody has to have a copy of this huge file, which is what's the blockchain now, like 28 gig?
Yeah, it's about 24 gig at the moment.
Yeah,
It's not that big. It's not that big.
Anyway, but instead of everybody, having that big blockchain, what MaidSafe would do is you could actually run Bitcoin on MaidSafe. They do have their own virtual currency that they would have, SafeCoin, but it would chop that blockchain up into hundreds or thousands, I don't know how many pieces, but it would distribute the blockchain and encrypt it onto everybody's computer on the network. And then when you accessed it, your packets would jump around the network to get what it needed, and that would actually make everything faster, because the more people used it, the more copies of things there would be, and the closer to you the nodes would be.
Yeah, so yeah, it's a bit like BitTorrent, basically, because I get a personal sense of satisfaction hosting the bootstrap.dat file on a BitTorrent, hosting Linux Mint, the latest version 17, 64-bit, which has whole disk encryption now. I actually prefer Mint to Ubuntu because it's just a bit more customizable and a bit quicker. And I actually savor it. I like doing it. I like to think that I'm kind of doing my duty almost by hosting this stuff.
You are, though. You're perpetuating the world you want to live in, Yeah. You want this to exist, so you're going to contribute to it. That's value in and of itself. I wish more people would appreciate that sort of value than maybe just the monetary kind.
What happens a lot with these type of networks like BitTorrent, and when Napster came out, what I would see a lot of times is, you'd go on Napster, you boot up your client, and you'd want a song, you'd go on there, you'd see 7 of them up there, and it'd be like, okay, I want that one. You click on it, it'd be like, oh, that one's gone now. That guy went offline, so you click on another one, and that guy'd go offline, and then now there'd be some more online. So anyway, you'd have these people that would connect just long enough to get what they wanted, and then they would disconnect again because they didn't want to be sharing out their bandwidth because it slowed down the other stuff on their computers. So it was more of a greed-based thing that they wanted to just grab what they could get while they were on there and suck it down and then not share what they had. Where with MaidSafe and some of these other new networking things, they have built-in incentives by sharing a part of your computer and your bandwidth out. You earn things like SafeCoin or whatever, which is a virtual currency. So you could just, by running your node, you would actually be just earning a cryptocurrency, which I think is a brilliant idea.
Yeah, and it's the kind of progress we can all take part in. There's also ideas around Torcoin as well, that they want to release a coin that it encourages people to run.
Oh, I would love that. I would love that. I think they should do that. They should absolutely do that.
Good. Right, guys. I think it's time that we started addressing a few of these questions. So we had some comments from yesterday that we didn't get time to address. So here we have Motto2KX2 saying he likes some of the ideas that we were talking about with GitHub, and I think it was like open source hardware. How about green energy built on GitHub? Present the idea and sketch and data and see what happens when the world works on it together. So this is the phenomena that we've been seeing recently of people putting not just code-based projects on GitHub, because we were talking about doing this Bitcoin tour, which we'll talk about more next week, where I proposed an idea where we could turn World Crypto Network into a distributed autonomous corporation, that you would start off with an elite 7 who would all have copies of a Bitcoin Armory multi-part wallet. One of these things will be divided up. So it's a root key in Bitcoin that is divided up into 7 parts. You would distribute that around the network, and then you would randomly select from that 7, the elite 7, who gets to be in control of all the funds every, say, 3 months. And that we could do all of this through GitHub, and it wouldn't just be exclusively code-based projects, it would be outreach projects. So we'd go to regions of the world and we would airdrop, you know, open source hardware like the Bitcoin the Skyhook Bitcoin ATM. We would airdrop like, you know, USB keys with tails, copies of the blockchain, you know, stuff like that to really kind of get this stuff kind of distributed and out there. And I'm all for the idea of putting more kind of CAD designs, computer-aided designs for hardware onto GitHub so that engineers, physical engineers, not just software engineers, can actually start to open source some of their ideas as well.
Yeah, I am too. I think it's a great idea. I've done a lot of alternate energy research myself. I have a background also in electronics and stuff, and I've done work with Tesla coils and things like that, that with a lot of guys do, and they post videos on YouTube and share ideas and stuff. But it's difficult doing collaborations like that online. GitHub might be a good way to work on collaborations. Reddit and other forums are kind of a pain to do it because of just the way that the posts work in there and looking through everything.
Yeah, so this is something that Nick just posted in the video section. It's open source blueprints for civilization. Build yourself. I love that. That's a great line.
This is a great group. I've donated to them before a few times, and their project's coming around quite nicely. It's, you know, to basically create a society in a box, so you can just do it all yourself. Anything happens, you can just pop it open, and here you go. You got a new civilization.
I almost feel like we need to become decent human beings before we get good enough at leaving this planet. Like before we start infesting the universe and colonizing other planets, we need to work out how to be a decent species first. So I'm all for this, but like before we get that powerful, I kind of feel like we need to work on the ethics a little bit more and actually working out how to form consensus. We also, staying with the theme of like hardware and ATMs, we also had this question from Martin Davidson yesterday we didn't quite get time for. Do you think Bitcoin vending machines are a good way of growing adoption, aside from the potential difficulties with the new bit license will pose if countries adopt it? Part 2, he says, do you think most countries will follow New York and the bit license? So I do think that the ATMs are very good, although I would say anecdotally the ones that we have in Old Street in London, in East London, don't get used very much. And the owners of the hardware have told me, or at least one of them has, that they break down a lot. And so there's a lot of, it's not easy. You can only really run an ATM if that's your full-time job. It's difficult to do, as a lot of entrepreneurs do, where they try to have 2 or 3 jobs running at the same time. It's kind of got to be the kind of, you know, the thing where you're around when it kind of breaks down, because the only people that are using these ATMs at the moment are the enthusiasts.
Yeah, I think it's labor intensive because you got to go and take the cash out of them and go back and, you know, make sure they're working all the time. So it's a lot of attention to it, and then you got to worry about theft, and there's a large investment to it, and you can't have much of a markup on the price of the Bitcoin or the cryptocurrency that your ATM has, otherwise people just get them online.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I kind of want to get an ATM. I've been looking at the Skyhook. I think that's a decent model to go with because you load it yourself. You don't really have to rely on, it dealing with an exchange, prices, etc. So I kind of like that. Those seem a little bit more reliable too. There's not a whole lot to them. Maybe a little
Yeah.
easier to
I'm,
maintain.
I, I'm definitely only going to support an open source ATM. If I do start recommending to other people, I think Carl Drake is doing a great job with CoinPunk. I think he's doing a good job with Skyhook. Yeah, it's open source or not, right now. I'm just done with these kind of proprietary business models. So we have a question from a lot earlier from Wayne90079 who says that flight MH17 was the first flight was on the 17th of the 7th, 97, and tragically came down on 17th of the 7th, 2014, yesterday, exactly an hour and a day between the 17 years that it was around. And then he goes on to explain that the Illuminati love to play with numbers and figures. Can you not see the wood from the trees? The chance of a scenario like this is trillions to one. So I'm not like a big supporter of those conspiracy theories because that could just as easily be put down to a coincidence. But yeah, I do kind of see the uncanniness of like a flight that was exactly 17 years old when it was shot down.
Yeah, I don't know. The first thing I thought of on that flight was, oh, the Malaysian airline, wasn't that the one that went missing a while back? Now they found it and they shot it down.
That's what I thought. I thought too. I didn't think they shot it down. I was just like, why is this in the news again? A Malaysian airline? Did they find it? But did you guys see the comment over on the right by Steve Zibler that Dell now accepts Bitcoin? I had just pulled that up 12 minutes ago. Posted on Street Insider.
Yeah, I'm just looking.
Michael Dell tweets to the world: Dell is now the world's largest e-commerce business to accept Bitcoin.
Wow.
A little late to the party, but
he is a little bit.
Is he though? He's pretty early by OEM standards, right? There's still an OEM when it comes to computers, aren't they? I guess not anymore. Somebody else makes all their stuff for them. They just slap their Dell logo on it.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't know. They used to be based in Texas, but I don't know how much they actually make anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. On the right, do we expect others?
Yeah, so Anna Kurth, who's a regular follower, thanks Anna for continuing to support us. She asked, do we expect other states and countries to follow the New York license model, the BIT license model? Yes.
I do. I don't see why they wouldn't. A lot of places follow New York's lead. That's why this is such a big deal for the community, That's why there's such a big hubbub over what New York's doing, is because somebody somewhere is not as informed, not as close to the source, and is going to be like, oh, that's what they did in New York? New York's successful, let's just copy that.
The way I see it is, they can pass whatever laws they want, but enforcement, how are they going to enforce it?
Right, because this doesn't apply to individuals that are going to be on local Bitcoins, as we were worried about yesterday, Nick. We didn't know if it would apply to individuals, but it doesn't look like it does. And anyway, how can you prove where a transaction takes place? If I tip someone with change tip and they're in Bitcoin, am I breaking the law? Are they breaking the law? I don't. And how are you going to prove that?
Yeah, I mean, if they have IP address tracking. I mean, how wild are they going to get for prosecution?
It doesn't record the IP address, though. It doesn't. The blockchain doesn't store IP addresses.
And I would like to make a comment that recently the Supreme Court ruled that an IP address is not a person. I would like to think that also applies to a Bitcoin address. There's no way a Bitcoin address can be a person. You merely are a custodian to private keys. It is possible for someone to generate the same private key and public key pair as you did. It's not like that can't happen. It's just incredibly rare.
Yeah, they have to prove that you were the person on that computer at that time running that IP addresses. And that's why in the UK, for example, there are laws like, I think there's a weird law, I think I'm right in saying this, that you are not allowed to run a Wi-Fi network without a password protection on it. I believe there's some kind of, I think it's only for businesses, or it might be for residents. And the reason is because there have been numerous cases where frauds and pedophiles have actually used other people's network connections to commit their crimes, and then tried to pin it on that person. So they'd like be next door neighbors, or it could be someone sat outside in a van who's then siphoning off your bandwidth. So I believe the UK government, I'll look into this for tomorrow's show, but I believe what I remember when I was looking into this was that as an individual, if you're running an open Wi-Fi without WPA security, technically you are committing an offense, because you're effectively allowing someone to use your internet for nefarious ends.
Yeah, pre-crime again. If somebody could possibly do something bad with something you're providing, and that kind of goes back to the Silk Road thing too, with, you know, and that judge there was like, we don't give a shit what it is. I'm making up my own rules for this case.
Well, I don't think the argument that Bitcoin isn't money isn't a very good one anyways. I think Bitcoin is money. But I mean, the government says it isn't, so...
But all information is money. And what makes Bitcoin valuable is the infinite traceability that it allows. So you can only spend a unit of account on the Bitcoin exchange if you can prove you own it, which involves you giving a reference to the last output that was on the network, which then refers to an input that then refers to an output, right? So it's just an infinite memory, a functionally infinite memory. And maybe this segues into nicely Anna's next question, which says, doesn't running a full node also require you to have a separate computer set up and keeping it running, paying for electricity and maintenance? In that case, it would not only be a question of not wanting to take responsibility. So no, you can run, if you're powerful, if your computer is powerful enough, you can run a full node on your main computer. I run a full node on here. You don't have to have it open all of the time. The important thing is that you've got a recent copy of it, and a good you know, large copy of the blockchain. It's just in the event that if it gets forked, you can then go back onto the network and you can actually make a claim. You're going to say, right, I'm not going to run this new version of the software that's just been released by the developers. I'm going to continue to run the old software. You boot up your copy of Qt and it downloads the blocks from the old network, because in order for them to have a hard fork, they actually have to publish a new client to the network. They'll probably put a checkpoint in it which tells all the nodes which copy of the blockchain to follow, and it then prevents you from, you know, doing any kind of double spending and things like that. But if you philosophically disagree with them, you can just run the old copy, and a lot of the miners, if they also agree with you, will not point their hashing power at the new fork. They will continue.
It's self-defense.
Self-defense, yeah. And if you don't have this information, this money as information, you don't have a voice. Right, you're not there. You're just going to be a passive observer. You're going to sit back and just say, "Oh, let someone else make that decision for me." But you know, the network needs you to be an individual in order to get its strength. And then maybe the last question for today, Anna again says, "When will the bit license come into effect, or is it still in the stage of suggestion?" I believe it's 45 days time. That's what it said in the PDF that I read.
And there's going to be revisions.
Right. And you know, I would encourage everyone to go to that project on GitHub, which is onenameio/proposed-bitcoin.
Those guys are doing great work.
This isn't very good. Let me just.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just saying I wasn't doing a good job of reading it out. So there it is. So it's github.com/onenameio/proposed-bit-license-regulation. So you can go there. You can clone in desktop. You'll need to download the GitHub software for your Mac PC. It's very easy to use, and then you can read it in a text editor. Any text editor will do, but I use Writer Pro. You can also use Sublime Text as well, which will also cope with the markdown. But all the markdown is just like symbols like hashes and stuff that symbolize headings and subheadings. It's really not that sophisticated. And then you can actually fork it. And now a lot of people on Reddit were saying, well, let's fork it with a blank document. We can fork the code and then just reestablish it as an empty text document.
The first thing I would take out is the exemption for banks and financial institutions to not require a bit license. Oh, you're exempt. You already are part of the.
Eric Voorhees made the point that the reason this is a bad idea is because now companies like Bitstamp, who get institutional investment from VCs, will necessarily have to make every one of their customers comply with the New York State regulation on the off chance that they fall under that jurisdiction. So in practice, what happens is entrepreneurs play it safe because they don't want to get fined. So instead of just complying to the letter of the law, they go beyond what the law says they should do, so that in the event of any kind of prosecution or investigation, they can say, look, guys, we went beyond what you asked us to do. I mean, since we were already set up anyway, and since we had all this institutional investment, which is all regulation helps. I mean, all regulation does is help the rich get richer, because the only people that can comply with the regulations are those that have the money and the advantage. So this is the point that Eric Voorhees was making on his blog, with a blog post entitled "Reflections on the NYDFS Bitcoin Proposal and the Right of Privacy." And good on Eric, sticking to his guns, even though a lot
everyone
of people,
should read that.
Everyone should read
it.
So Eric Voorhees, I can't believe how quickly he wrote this as well. He wrote it a few hours afterwards, and he starts off with saying, "Today, as human society progresses onward, CoinMap broke 5,000 global business listings." And he then basically goes on to reflect on the announcement from the Bit license, and he also lays into the Winklevi, or the Winkle bosses as I call them, and their apparent support of it. Well, of course they would support it. It basically staves off any kind of competition that they might have had. So I think that, yeah, we need like an open source version of local Bitcoins. That's how we would counteract it, to answer your last point, Anna, is that if you just as a private individual do the kinds of things that the corporates used to do at, just a private entity, there's not a lot the regulators can do because they don't have the resources. And Anna says, yeah, thank you for answering my questions and the valuable insights. Thank you very much, Anna, for taking part and joining in. So any final thoughts for today? Did we arrive at a conclusion of what a state is? A state is basically just a memory with edges.
Yeah, it's a defined area or a defined something as the state, right?
It's a group of people assuming authority over other people and land. That it's
that's the execution of the memory. Is the people executing the memory. That's the government, but the state would be like the memory itself, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I could go to Ukraine with one of those Men in Black memory erasers. Do you remember those things in that film?
Yeah.
And just erase everyone's memory. Tabula rasa, right, means blank slate in Latin. Tabula rasa, wipe your memories and then see if you want to kill each other. Right now you don't remember anymore. Like, it's entirely arbitrary. And since our memories are so, think about how many times you have false memories where you remember something that didn't even happen. And think about the number of times that people play on your memory by making you think that something happened or something is important that you don't think. Just more people need to think independently for themselves, because otherwise we're just going to carry on in this kind of herd mentality, and we're just in the same way that the city do, where North Cetina in object-centered sociality, just these packs of people, crowd around these corporations and hide behind the corporate personhood just so they can shuffle money between one group of people and another. I really don't see the point. It's a very unintelligent thing to do. It just makes us not a lot better than animals, and I think that the human race can succeed a lot further beyond that. Great.
And if you think of things logically, like, why does this group of people have the right to do this, but this group of people doesn't? The power, that guy wears that costume, that guy wears that costume. Why does this guy have more rights than this guy? Or that guy has that skin color, that guy has that skin color. It's really just arbitrary and nonsensical what they're wearing or their skin color. They're both human beings. They should have the same, rights, and neither of them should have greater authority, because you can't grant rights to someone else that you don't have yourself.
Yeah, very good point. Well, Nick, any final thoughts?
One second, I'm muted. No, I just hope everybody who's in conflict zones stays safe. No more blood today. Right? Let's not read any stories.
Also, like follow Andy Carvin on Twitter. He's like a distance journalist. He basically retweets and comments on social media sources of information from the front lines of a lot of this horror itself, and helps to shine a light on what the mainstream media often overlook because they have all their editorial policies. We definitely need more information to become public so that regular people can start, you know, forming an opinion on this and saying, actually, I don't want this shit, not in my name. You don't get to invade this territory, you know, in my name. I mean, no one's invading North Korea, right? Because it's not an enemy of Israel, so no one cares. All the civil rights abuses can take place there, but not if it's in this bit of land over here. It all just seems very arbitrary. Anyway, thank you very much for occupying our territory today and living under our laws. If you have any comments, you can tweet me at Mr. Chris Ellis. You can also follow us on Twitter at WorldCryptoNet. Thank you to my guests, Jamie and Nick, for joining me again today. And I will see you sometime next week, whenever I feel like it, or even later on today for the Bitcoin group. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome. Can't wait for that. Thanks.
All right.